Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to show you my setup of my Traveler's Notebook insert for the newest kit from ByTheWell4God. This is When God Asks a Question. This kit did sell out again. It was up twice for pre-sale and sold out both times, and it will not be restocked at this time. It might be restocked down the road, but they've got to jumpstart and get started on June's kit. So I normally do my setup off camera, and I started to already pull things together to do that, but then I thought maybe I would just turn on the camera so you guys can see what I'm doing in case you guys have questions. So we're not doing anything super fancy, but I decided that I'm going to work in a Traveler's Notebook. I originally was going to jump into my interleaved Bible and do a page, but as I started to look at even just day one of the devotional, I realized I have a lot of stuff that I want to journal down, verses I want to look into and write about and study, and so I think there's just going to be a lot more writing than I would do in my journaling Bible. So I'm just going to go ahead and create in a Traveler's Notebook, but I do still want to play with paints and stamping techniques and do the things that I would do in my interleaved Bible. So I need to do some prep to this notebook to make it work for what I want to do. So I'm actually going to deconstruct it. I'm going to take it all apart and make it into a ring-bound album. And so I've pulled out some products to do that, to set it up. And then I'm just going to create the opening page on camera for you guys. And I decided to go ahead and start it with a prayer. I don't always do this, but I went ahead and just cut a tag out using one of the 6x6 pattern papers. Those I believe are still in the shop. And so I cut a tag out, and then I also cut out like a 3x5 card. I cut another tag to back it and then ran that through my typewriter. And then I'm going to create a fun little lacy pocket for my prayer to stick into. So I'm going to create this opening page and just kind of show you how I do that, how I deconstruct it and put it into the rings and all that goodness. And then for the pages, I am going to be using some white gesso to prep the pages. The pages are nice and thick in here, but I want to get super messy with mixed media and paints and just really play. I've not been doing a whole lot of that lately, and that's kind of where I get inspiration from, is really getting messy with paints. And so I want to make sure that these pages don't fall apart. So I did just pick up some plain old white gesso. This is from Walmart. With everything being closed, I couldn't get the one that I typically like, which is Dina Wakely does a really nice gesso. I could order it online, but I just grabbed this and we'll give it a go. I'm not, too worried about it since it's not going in my Bible. It doesn't need to be too perfect. You could also do the same thing with clear gesso if you already have that on hand, but I just grabbed some white so I could use it in my interleaved Bible as well. And so I will prep this first page and show you how I do that. We're going to play with some distress paints. These are brand new to me and I've been loving playing with these, but you could also do something similar with the watercolors. So let me go ahead and put you on fast forward and we'll just put this together really quick. Okay, so I'm going to begin by deconstructing this notebook. You could also do this process with the devotional itself if you wanted to turn that into a ring-bound notebook. So I'm just using a bone folder to pull out the staples. You could also use a staple remover. I don't have that, so I'm using my bone folder to pull those out. And then I'm just going to use my trimmer to trim down the pages, and I'm just lining up the center crease and just cutting right down that. It really is not that complicated. Now, the pages are a little bit curved from being in the book, so I try to kind of keep them in the position that they were in when they were in the book, if that makes sense. So when I cut this in half, a chunk goes in the front and a chunk goes in the back. Same thing with the cover. And that way it all just kind of sits right until it flattens out. I'm doing the same thing for the cover, just lining up the crease. Going to cut that with my trimmer, and then now I can begin the hole punching process. You could also do a disc bound version if you like that better with the Happy Planner punch. I don't like the Happy Planner discs. I prefer rings. So I'm using the planner punch board, and I've set my punches on 20, 45, and 72, and that way I have it written on the bottom as well. So anytime I make a notebook like this, they are always in the same position. So if I want to add cards or add ephemera or add an envelope or add something to my notebook, an extra page, I know exactly where to punch the holes every single time, no matter what I'm working in when I make them myself. So 20, 45, and 72 are where I put those punches. And I found that you really can only punch one, maybe two sheets at a time because this paper is pretty thick. But I get all those punched, and then now I can insert my rings. I'm going to insert a link down below for the rings that I'm using. I think these are a 1-inch ring, but they have tons on Etsy, tons on Amazon if you want something colored or, you know, whatever. They have all kinds of different ones out there. So I've taken another piece of the 6x6 pattern papers and I've trimmed this down, and I'm adding the kit sticker to the front of it, and then I'm going to cut a little banner tail at the bottom. So you just cut up the center and then you come in from each corner, and that gives you the little fishtail banner. This piece is about 3 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall, and so it just creates this fun little banner. I loved this notebook with the florals. I knew that I wanted to use it, but it's super busy, so I definitely needed something layered behind the sticker. And anytime I work in a separate traveler's notebook, I always add the kit sticker to the front. That way I know it coordinates with that particular devotional. So now I can just pop these pages out as I want to work on them. And so we're going to begin with that opening page. And like I said, I'm going to prep it with some gesso. Initially, I went in with a paint card to apply the gesso, so it was really thin, but sometimes that can be a little patchy, and I don't know. I decided that I was just going to go for chunky texture. And so I go in with this first layer with the card, dry it, and then decide to go in with a second layer with just a paintbrush. A paintbrush leaves brush strokes, so if that bothers you, you can do this technique with the card and just, you know, do a couple of layers. So you're going to do a layer, dry it, and then add a second layer and maybe even a third layer to make sure that you don't miss any spots. And that gives you a nice smooth application. But I'm not too worried about that. I'm okay with texture, so I'm just going to go in with the second layer with a paintbrush. You can also use like a palette knife or a brayer tool. They're all just going to give you a different application, so it just depends on what you want. And you can do this with clear gesso also if you have that on hand. So once that's dry, I decided to add a little more texture. So I pulled out the stencil. This is a new stencil over in the ByTheWell4God shop. And the only thing I had on hand was transparent texture paste. I actually prefer regular texture paste, but that's okay. We're gonna use the transparent. The transparent's more like matte gel medium. It kind of has a little bit of a glossy finish to it, so it just behaves a little bit differently than regular texture paste. But I put that through the stencil with a palette knife, and so it left this fun question mark texture on the background. And then now I'm gonna add my paint. So I've dabbed out some of the distress paint colors, and these are water-based and they react with water, so they just behave differently than traditional acrylic paints. So I'm just going to swipe the paper through that, and you'll see in some places the pink that I'm using, I think it's Tattered Rose, and then I'm using Squeeze Lemonade. They mix together and kind of give you a really soft orangey color, but then other areas the yellow holds on to its color, the pink holds on to its color, and so you just kind of get a really nice mix. These paints are so different from regular acrylic paints. I can't explain it. You've got to grab one or two to try and play with and see what you think, because I'm really enjoying these paints. But I just sprayed tons and tons of water on here, let things drip, let things run, and because I have that texture paste on there, the paint will kind of, I don't know, pool and collect around those textures, and so you kind of get, I don't know, some fun darker areas where the texture paste is on the page. Just make sure that's good and dry, and because I have that gesso down first, I can get this super wet, I can get it super covered in paint, and it's totally okay. So I'm still thinking that I'm going to do the pocket with that lace piece, so I'm going to trim it down a little bit, but spoilers, I end up not doing this. Don't worry, in a future video I will create some kind of pocket with this or something, but once I put this down, I realized it is going to completely cover that fun background that I have, which I was okay with initially, but I really like the background and didn't want to cover it up. So I've sprinkled a little bit of shaded lilac distress paint on there just to bring in a little purple, and decided to scrap the pocket idea, and we will insert that somewhere else in the book. But instead, I'm just going to attach the tag with a paper clip. That way I can still see the background. And that happens sometimes. It's okay to change up your plan and what you're doing as you go along. I'm going to attach the typed out tag on the back of that tag. That way, you know, if I just ran the pattern paper through my typewriter, I wouldn't have been able to see my typing because the back has print on it as well. So I had to do 2 tags. And then I'm deconstructing one of these fabric tabs. I like to do this overhand knot for my bows, and I only used 1 piece of fabric. That way I can use the other piece in an entry or use it somewhere else in this little notebook. And then I'm just going to use that to hold on to the tag. I thought about adding a title with the alpha stickers, but went for this die cut piece instead. And really this turned out a lot more simple than what I initially had planned for it, because I wanted the background to kind of just be on its own and not covered up. So now I can stick this back into that notebook, and as I work through the kit, I can do the same routine. I can just pull out the pages I'm going to work on, and I can get messy, get creative, and then stick them back in here, and they can get as big and fluffy and chunky as I want it to, and I can have lots of room for notes and add extra pieces and just get messy. So if you are kind of apprehensive about Bible journaling, this is a great alternative to that. You can get, creative, have fun, work through the kit in that creative way, but don't worry about, altering Bible pages. So if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Check out the description box below for links to everything that I used today. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.